get this $90 gem in white. Doesn't it look gorgeous? For me at least, a nice change from all black, black, black and RGB here, RGB there. So today we are looking at something that's more silence oriented without any gimmicks. Instead, we can expect some good solid build quality. We are of course talking of the Be Quiet Pure Base 500 in white, the tempered glass edition. As I've said, right now this particular version comes in at a price of roughly $90. Were you to go for the standard variant in black with a solid side panel without any tempered glass, you'd pay like $75. So this may or may not be the perfect case for you silence enthusiasts out there. It's basically a case for those that like a more classic approach and don't need to have a ton of lighting in their system. Are the $90 well spent here, or are there some flaws too? If there are some, what are they? Kindly included is an alternate top panel, basically a dust filter, because in default there's this fancy white magnetic cover on here, which also comes with a little bit of sound dampening material, but less vents that allow the case to breathe. For the best airflow results, you therefore slap the ventilated top cover onto this case. In terms of looks, I sure do find the Pure Base 500 appealing with its simple approach, especially since this also happens to be a nice change from cases that I usually review for you guys. The color white most likely does most of the job here. Praiseworthy is the paint job. That's some quality we are talking about. It's a beautiful white. While I don't necessarily find those rounded elements in the front super duper appealing, it needs to be said it's more or less Be Quiet's trademark by now, and just because I'm not 100% into it doesn't mean others can't love it. But I sure do appreciate the minimalistic approach, no doubt. What I noticed right away in the very first moments with the case is how robust and thick this steel actually is. At $90, not all too common, not even when looking at fractal design. I'd even go this far and say this is some sort of a little tank in terms of robustness. Pre-installed are two of Be Quiet's renowned Pure Wings 2 140mm fans, one in the front, one on the rear. These are also pretty damn quiet, even at their max rated 900 RPM. Generally speaking, it's quite obvious the manufacturer did focus a lot on silence. This, after all, should be a good purchasing argument, meaning we don't just get sound dampening material on the top panel cover that comes attached on default, but also on the side as well as on the front panel. The latter also sporting removable dust filters for easy cleaning. Neat. While we're at it, on the bottom, we do get a long removable filter for the PSU, and on the top, in theory, if you decide to go for the alternate cover, a magnetic dust filter. Of course, this happens to be one of those cases again that don't necessarily allow for the best airflow. Usually when following the latest trends, airflow gets sacrificed for a fancy glass panel in the front. This time around, however, there's a more practical reason behind it, that being silence. Nonetheless, in my opinion, there's enough room left for the case to intake fresh air, so don't worry too much about it. Now, the internal clean layout I like a lot, even though rubber grommets are lacking, but at a price of $90, it's not that big of a deal. The specs immediately win me over. It really seems this case is capable of holding a lot of hardware. Tons of possibilities given here. For instance, in the front you could easily mount up to a 360 or 280mm radiator with lots of clearance on the bottom due to the big carotte down there in the PSU shroud. But even at the top there's room for up to a 240mm radiator. The manufacturer has gone for a clever way of fixing the issue many cases have with top-mounted radiators. They simply move the mounting holes sideways a little so radiator and motherboard don't interfere with each other. A problem well fixed. However, even the biggest aluminum behemoth, I mean an air cooler, is an option. Such a CPU cooler with up to a height of a whopping 190mm is supported. Obviously, long graphics cards don't pose a problem either. What I find to be a bit of a bummer though is that despite this being a fairly wide case, it doesn't actually allow for a vertical installation of one's GPU. While I'm not a fan of vertically mounted graphics cards anyway, it sure would have made for a nice little extra feature. Now let's get to the storage, hard drives and the likes. A nice little feature is that the hard drive cage can be repositioned a little bit depending on how you like it. Plus it can obviously be removed altogether. Traditionally, that cage can hold up to two 3.5-inch drives. You could also mount a 2.5-inch drive, such as an SSD, to the top of the cage, for instance. As usual, there of course also are dedicated mounting points for SSDs directly behind the motherboard tray and two more mounting points on the left. This bracket can be taken out for a more convenient drive installation, so you could nicely present your 2.5-inch SSDs on the main side. As you may have noticed, my usual test system fits absolutely perfectly into this case. This time around with a Purebase 500, I was having a much easier time getting hardware installed, as opposed to with the more recent cases I've taken a look at. All is thought through extremely well here, and it's the little details that sometimes make a big difference when building into a case. That usually doesn't stop me from completely butchering the cable management job. But would you look at that? Could this be real? I honestly have no idea how and what I've exactly done, but let me praise myself for now. By my standards, I've done one hell of a good job this time around. Well, feel free to congratulate me on my achievement. So to sum things up, what can I say about the Be Quiet Purebase 500? Well, it didn't just manage to greatly impress me, but also surprise me in many ways. At $90, I honestly wouldn't have expected that much thick steel coming into play, and the fact that every little small detail has been thought through remarkably well. That way, a case doesn't necessarily have to be big in order for it to be able to pack a lot of hardware, even high-end components. But also when it comes to noise levels, Be Quiet does score well. The combination of sound dampening material and quiet fans seems to pay off real well here. Meaning, downsides right now I can't really think of any, especially not at a price of $90. Of course, aesthetically, it may not be everyone's taste. Some simply prefer a little more glass and maybe even some lighting here and there. We do not get that with this case. In my opinion, what would have made the case absolutely perfect? An integrated fan controller or a fan hub. But then again, sure, at $90, possibly a little too much to ask for. Today's Be Quiet Purebase 500 sure does deserve great praise, especially for you silence freaks out there. It could be a good choice for you. And yeah, thanks for watching guys, see you in the next one.